even if I don't respect the man who will now inhabit it. That we should be hearing more of. Listen, I may not have had respect for the policies and the direction that Barack Obama took with this nation, but you respect the office of the presidency. You don't just sit in a corner and stamp your feet. You obstruct and you push forth your agenda, but you don't throw hissy fits. You don't call him illegitimate. No one contested the legitimacy of Barack Obama's election. Well, of course, the response would be, well, there were no allegations that he hacked the election or that there was any outside influence or anything like that. But at the end of the day, a vote's a vote. The votes get counted. The states count their own votes. The states put their electoral votes towards the winner. That's how it works. If you want to complain that your dirty tricks, your dirty laundry was exposed to the world, and have us focus on the dirty laundry, and have us focus not on the dirty laundry, but to focus on the wrongdoers who went into your system and found your dirty laundry, how about taking some responsibility? All you're doing now, and again, I alluded to this earlier, all you're doing now is you're setting a very low bar for the Trump administration to now get past and get over. You have put him in such a position where even just swearing himself in, you have to obstruct. You're going to create sympathy for the Trump administration not be able to get things done. But then when they get things done, because they're going to have a majority in both the House and the Senate, when they get things done, the perception will be that the country is moving forward despite your opposition. The next 2 years are going to be Republican years. It's going to be their opportunity to take government in the direction they want to take it in. We see the battle lines being drawn right now with the repeal and replacement of Obamacare. There's going to be many more things coming down the pipe in the next 2 years. It's going to be interesting to see. But you know what? Maybe what they're doing is they're just still licking their wounds months after an election has happened. So let's give a little message to whatever Democrats may be listening to this show. Granted, not many Democrats listen to this show, but maybe they'll stumble upon it and they'll hear this. You lost. Get over it. What, do you think it was going to be something more profound? That's all it comes down to. You can talk about how the game was played and who had... You can talk about how the game was played and who had more influence in doing whatever. But at the end of the day, the die was cast when the American voter went and they marked their vote down. However they do it in whatever state they did it in. You lost. Don't like it? Get better. Get more people to show up to the polls. Maybe not do so many dirty tricks against your own people and disenfranchise voters, especially young voters who supported Bernie Sanders. Maybe not have the press in your pocket so much that they have now become a lapdog to you and the American public starts mistrusting them to the point where maybe legitimate news got lost in the shuffle. You have no one to blame but yourself for these things, Democrats. You lost. Don't like it? Get better. This is the same advice I gave to Republicans back in 2008 and 2012. You don't like the outcome? You don't like the way things went? Regroup, replace, reinvigorate, and let your principles be your guide. Now, say what you want about the Republican Party and whether or not Trump's a real conservative or whether we are still a conservative party or whether the Republican Party has been co-opted by a populist movement. All legitimate arguments to have. But say this, the Republican Party ran a primary system that had the most participation in its history. They had more candidates in its history. They had more ideas exchanged publicly in its history. They had a convention that was done by the rules set forth by the party that everyone played by. They didn't have superdelegates who were upper echelon party members and donors who were in there to put the thumb on the scale in favor of one candidate or another. Do you think the Republican Party got the candidate they had wished for when they had their convention? Of course not. But the system did its job. The Republican voters spoke. The candidate, Trump, did his job. President-elect Trump did his job by having people brought into the party that he knew would support him. It was a populist movement. In essence, an election is a popularity contest, folks. Whoever gets the most people to vote for them wins. Nobody asks, oh, well, what do you really believe on this issue, or that issue, or the other issue when you go into a poll? In fact, you could be the dumbest person on the issues in the world. As long as you have a preference for who you're voting for, and you're an American citizen, you cast that ballot. If you don't like the results, get better. Bring your own people in, Democrats. You had a candidate, Bernie Sanders, who's lighting your party on fire, who was getting tens of thousands of people at rallies. You had energy. You had an infusion of new ideas. Ideas I could not stand, but new ideas nonetheless. New concepts that could have really turned out people to vote. Didn't happen though, did it? What you did was you put your thumb on the scale and you anointed a candidate. A very flawed candidate, by the way, who was riddled by scandal, who was deemed untrustworthy by the voters, and it turns out the voters were right, especially according to the emails that were leaked by whatever source you want them to be. And we'll go into what source and who did what in the end of the show. Very interesting comments from at least one cybersecurity legend, we'll call him, about what he thinks actually happened with this hacking of the election. But we'll get to that after the break, and actually when we come back from that break, we're going to have our good friend David Keene talking about one of the last gasps of the Obama administration to try to take away your Second Amendment rights. The end round around the Constitution perpetrated by Secretary Clinton, Secretary Kerry, and Barack Obama, and what can be done by the Trump administration to protect your Second Amendment rights. Gene Baradelli, Behind Enemy Lines. We'll be back right after these brief words. If you're a long-time listener of the show, or maybe this is your first time listening, you can probably tell that me and the gang here, we like to have our share of fun, whether it's on or off the air. We talk about 2-drink minimum radio and no medication Wednesdays or whatever day it may be. That's why when we found the people at Less Government, More Fun, we knew it was a match made in heaven with this show. Folks, we live in a time where government is out of hand. Our founding fathers did not intend government to be all-consuming in all parts of our lives. That's why we are telling you to go to lessgovmorefun.com, check out the website, check out the swag. What the people want is less government, more fun. Pass it on, make it happen.
Who might you save?
Your mother, your father, your husband, uncle, aunt, son.
Learn FAST, F-A-S-T, the sudden signs of a stroke, and you could save
your friend, teacher, boss.
F, face drooping. A, arm weakness. S, speech difficulty. T, time to call 911. F-A-S-T. That's F, face drooping. A, arm weakness. S, speech difficulty. T, time to call 911. The sooner they get to the hospital, the sooner they'll get treatment. And that can make a remarkable difference in the recovery of
your neighbor, the waiter, grandmother, grandfather.
So learn FAST, the sudden signs of a stroke, then pass it on, because you never know who might save you.
Your wife, your colleague.
Spot a stroke fast. Visit strokeassociation.org, brought to you by the American Stroke Association and the Ad Council.
Behind Enemy Lines Radio is all about being right. No, seriously, it is. If you ever listen to Russ Gallo or me go back and forth on some issue, we always want to make sure that we remember who said what and when we said it. That's why we go to goonrecord.com. It's a brand new social media website. Challenge people on what they believe, whether it's in politics, sports, entertainment, finance, whatever. There's a category for you at goonrecord.com. Check it out right now. Tell us, what do you stand for? It's time for you to go on record. Behind Enemy Lines. Back on the air. Gene Baradelli, back behind Enemy Lines, joining me on the phone right now. It's a pleasure to welcome back to the show the opinion editor of the Washington Times and author of Shall Not Be Infringed, The New Threats to Your Second Amendment, Mr. David Keene. Sir, thank you so much for coming back on the show.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be with you.
Always great to talk to you, and the reason why that is because we always talk about my favorite issue, very close to my heart and close to the show, the Second Amendment, and specifically this time around, we're talking about kind of a parting shot that President Obama is making as he's as he leaves office, and that is the submission of a treaty from the UN that the U.S. has signed on to that you're going to talk to us about. So why don't you explain what the treaty is and how it came to be?
Well, the United Nations for about 10 or 15 years has been working on something called the Arms Trade Treaty. I was the public delegate to the negotiations during the Bush administration, and we stopped anything then because when George W. Bush came into office, he sent John Bolton up to the UN before he was the ambassador to lay down a red line. He said that we as a country would not be part of any international treaty that in any way infringed on the Second Amendment rights of the American people. When Barack Obama was elected, he sent his new Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, up to the UN to tell him that that red line no longer applied and that we wanted a treaty. He signed, or had John Kerry sign the treaty right after the 2012 election when he was reelected, and then held it at the White House because the Senate had informed him that there was no way they were going to ratify it. And then just before Christmas, he decided as one of his parting shots to send it to the Senate and ask for ratification. It's not going to be ratified, but that doesn't mean it isn't a danger to the American people's Second Amendment rights. And I can explain why that is, but it was part of the Obama administration's attempt to go around the Second Amendment, in essence, and get an international agreement that might require the Congress and the President to take action against American gun owners.
Now, as an attorney, David, I like to look at the history of negotiation of such treaties, or the legislative history of bills that pass through our legislatures at various levels. And in this particular case, I noticed that there was at one point language regarding national constitutional protection, which I guess didn't make it into the final language. Would that have protected Second Amendment rights for American citizens?
Yeah, the actual language that was in at one point and that the Bush administration was insisting upon, and so was the NRA, was that it would exclude privately owned, civilian-owned firearms in countries that have protection for such arms. That was specifically taken out of the draft of the treaty once the Obama administration came in. There's still some meaningless language in sort of the introductory part of the treaty that has nothing to do with anything. But in fact, the operative parts of the treaty, as they're being fleshed out now, interestingly sort of mirror the kinds of demands that Barack Obama was trying to get through the Congress and failed to get through: restrictions on so-called assault weapons, semi-automatic rifles, restrictions on pistols, the national registration system, all kinds of things like that the anti-gun movement has not been able to get domestically, but are hoping that somehow they can get through an international treaty. Now, they could do that if people were not vigilant here. But if a future administration, even without a signed treaty, tries to do some of these things under the treaty, as Barack Obama and Bill Clinton previously did under, you remember, the climate change treaty at Kyoto, which they never sent to the Senate, but they nevertheless used it to justify certain actions. So Congress has the power to stop that, but you have to keep an eye on it all the time. More importantly, maybe, is the fact that under international law, even if a treaty is not ratified, a country that signs it is supposedly required not to act contrary to its interests. And the operative problem here is that the only country in the world that actually recognizes the right of self-defense, which is what the Second Amendment is the United States. Most countries do not recognize either the right to possess a firearm to protect oneself or one's family, or that right in itself. So, and the UN, in fact, specifically rejects individual and family self-defense as a rationale for any kind of action. So, the problem is that part of the treaty, even if we don't sign it, requires